A Batman Beyond movie is so long overdue. Fans have been served injustice after injustice when it comes to this character since the show's original ending. We are a part of a superhero landscape full of cash grabs and nostalgia bait, but here's a movie that can appeal to our nostalgia and hopefully make a ton of money despite superhero fatigue, yet is still an original IP from the DCU, an untapped gold mine with stories to tell. A Batman Beyond movie would fit seamlessly into the reworked DCU. It could be an Elseworlds film, or it could simply take place in the future without messing up any current timelines or story arcs. This story could be live action, where I think Tanner Buchanan would be perfect to play Terry McGinnis. I mean, look at him. He looks like he was made by Amanda Waller to play this character. And I love the idea of Michael Fassbender playing an older Bruce Wayne. Mostly just based on the fact that I think he's a good actor, and his casting as Magneto is probably my favorite superhero movie casting of all time. Or this could be an animated film like what Chris Miller and Phil Lord pitched, which I think would go equally as hard. I'd like to see this movie as a hybrid combination of a few episodes from the show. Rebirth, Parts 1 and 2, Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2, Dead Man's Hand, Season 1, Episode 8, to introduce the Royal Flush Gang, and Babel, Season 2, Episode 12, with Shriek. Now, I know that sounds overstuffed, but I think recent superhero movies have shown that including several villains can really work if it's focused and handled well. I also think making this a straight-up origin story wouldn't fly with general audiences. That concept just isn't as popular or engaging anymore. So I think we can jump right into the action, where Terry is in year 2, 3, or even 4 as Batman. At this point, he's highly competent, him and Bruce are a good team, but not without their hiccups. Terry still views Batman as a way to get out his aggression, and he hasn't truly figured out what it means to be Batman. I want you to picture a Gotham similar to what Matt Reeves did in his universe, but more neon, more tech, and somehow more rain. This is the setting I'd want to see in this movie. As for how to balance all the villains, here's loosely how I think it could play out. Derek Powers operates as a corrupt business tycoon who has not yet obtained his abilities as Blight. We can leave that to a potential sequel. We can get a look into his corruption as well as Terry's origins through some flashbacks that would be in reference to the first 2 episodes of the show. We can see Terry's dad uncover some shady dealings at Powers' company that results in his death after Terry and him get into a fight. And we can see how Terry ends up stealing Bruce's suit to take on the mantle of Batman as a form of revenge. These flashbacks can be brief and interspersed throughout the movie so that we can see the corruption that goes on at the highest level of Gotham's elite, and also show us the guilt that Terry is dealing with over the death of his father without taking up too much of the runtime. Since Powers does not yet have his abilities as Blight, he enlists help of known felon Walter Shreve, aka Shriek, to help keep Batman out of his underhanded dealings. This would make Shriek the primary and most tangible antagonist to Batman in this film. Then I'd like to introduce the Royal Flush Gang for 2 particular reasons. One, there's never one set of villains committing crime at once in Gotham. There's always multiple, so this would just feel like a more plausible thing for Batman to have to deal with throughout the film. 2, anyone who has seen the show knows that Melanie is a far better love interest for Terry, way better than Dana, who I didn't even include in this pitch. Roughly, I think this is how the plot could go. Throughout the movie, I'd like to see a heavy focus on Bruce and Terry having a genuine mentor-mentee relationship with moments of growth, but also moments of bickering. I'd like to see what Terry's so-called life is like outside of Batman. One of the best things about Terry's Batman is he has all the responsibilities that someone like Peter Parker would have. School, friendships, family, all on top of being Batman. Perhaps at this point, Terry's in college so we can see him go to some classes, watch how it's hard for him to get along with his classmates and friends, and then he goes home to his small, crummy apartment with his mom and younger brother. Not that this needs to feel grounded in this sort of Neo-Blade Runner world, but I think this can make Terry more relatable for audiences who maybe aren't familiar with the show. I think pretty early on we can introduce the Royal Flush Gang. King, Queen, Ace, Jack, and of course, 10. They're in the middle of robbing a special showing of jewels and antiques at the Gotham Museum when Terry shows up and is able to handle King, Jack, and Queen. But due to Ace's size and strength, he gives Terry some issues and 10 is able to make off with the stash, but Terry gets Ace off of him and flies after 10. I think it'd be exciting to see a bit of an airborne battle before being grounded on the rooftops, chasing after one another, reminiscent of Batman and Catwoman. Before Terry can stop 10, King and the others come back from being beaten to take down Terry and escape. Back at the Batcave, Bruce gives Terry hell for letting them get away. He tells Terry that he's been Batman for far too long to be making these kinds of mistakes. Bruce rubs it in his face that he didn't have a mentor like Terry did, so it's inexcusable. Terry gets pissed at this attack on his character as he felt like he's done a good job as Batman overall. Bruce tells him that nothing else is likely to happen tonight after that, so Terry can get out of there. To cope after the fight with Bruce, Terry meets up with his friends at the club. They throw out the typical, "Look who decided to show up," or "Where have you been?" and all that as they berate him for never being around. Already in a bad mood and defensive, Terry decides to leave and walks around Gotham in the rain. At this point, he's approached by blonde beauty Melanie Walker. She asks what he's doing alone outside the club, and he reciprocates the question to her. And she tells him she's new to town and doesn't know anyone. The two of them walk around the neon-lit Gotham and bond over lack of friendships. Terry vents about how he feels like he's too consumed by other things in his life to maintain his friendships, and Melanie says she's too consumed by her family's constant moving to even form friendships. Maybe around this point, we could get some of those flashbacks that I mentioned earlier to examine Terry's origin as Batman. These can be short, that give us just enough to understand the inner workings of Terry's mind and the corrupt Gotham that he's been brought up in. I also think at this point we can get a thrilling action sequence with Shriek as Batman attempts to interfere with Power's operations. Soon after, it is revealed to the audience, but not to Terry, that Melanie is actually 10, and then Batman can confront the Royal Flush Gang again. He stops them from whatever it is they're doing, and this results in them being taken away by the police, and this is when 10's identity is revealed to Terry, and then the guilt of Melanie being arrested begins to weigh on him. For the final sequence, very similar to the Babel episode in the show, Shriek broadcasts a terrible shrill noise across Gotham and announces it will only stop if Batman unmasks himself and hands himself over. Bruce discusses the consequences of doing that with Terry, but Terry insists on confronting Shriek, telling Bruce that this is his shot at redemption, to feel like a worthwhile human being after what happened to his dad and to Melanie, which he views as his fault. And I'd really like for this to be the emotional climax of the film, with Terry expressing the desire he has to be Batman, to make up for his own mistakes in the past, contrasted with Bruce, who felt like he had to be, who was forced into being Batman. Together, they deduce how Shriek is producing the sound and devise a plan to stop him, where we can get a big action set piece between Batman and the villain. This ultimately ends up with Batman stopping Shriek, to which the city expresses their gratitude towards Terry, and Terry reflects on the lows, but is also reassured in the highs of being Batman. This is a very loosely put together pitch, but thanks for watching. Let me know what y'all think. I know I'd love to see this version of Batman come to the big screen sooner rather than later. If anyone happens to know James Gunn personally, go ahead and drop this links to him. Thanks.